And we're live.
That was cool.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Agency Operators Podcast. I'm Pasha. Here I'm with the special guest, Martin Zerrudo. I knew him from Seller Universe. He was a CEO at that agency. Now he's working for Quartile as the Director of Enterprise Brand Development. I think I got that title right. How you doing, Martin?
I'm doing well, Pasha. Long time no see. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, likewise. I'm doing very well. Happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
I would love to hear your story because I knew you from Seller Universe times, but
Right.
I didn't know much about before that. And now you're, working with Quartile for over a year, doing keynotes in Seattle. I see on LinkedIn, so that's very, very cool. So, before we get into the meat and potatoes, talking about what Quartile does, some of the AI that they incorporate into their algorithms. Let's just kind of take a step back and how did you end up in where you sit today?
No, for sure. Great question. And thank you so much for having me. So, when I went to college right after high school, I thought I was like, hey, I'm going to be a lawyer. And that didn't really pan out. I took the LSAT, which is like the exam you have to take to go to law school. And I had the option to go to a couple of schools. And then at the time I was a paralegal. And I'm like, hey, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe law wasn't really the field that I wanted to venture off into. I'm very active in my church that I go to. And at the time when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I had switched careers to marketing, and I was working at a mortgage firm. And the church that I go to has a nonprofit like media content organization. And they're like, hey, would you like to work there full time? So I did nonprofit for almost 10 years.
Wow.
Creating content, podcasts, TV shows, YouTube content, a lot of different hats, producing and hosting and writing for a lot of different kinds of intellectual properties. And in that time, I'd met somebody and I was about to get ready to get married. And it was right around when COVID was just about to hit that the concept of e-commerce and Amazon kind of intersected with my goals in life, because I really wanted to be able to provide. I wanted to be able to give the best future that I could for my wife and my future kid. I have a son now. And through a couple of network connections, I had gotten into contact with somebody who was like, hey, I'm starting up an Amazon agency. Do you want to help me out? And I was like, at the time I wasn't too sure, so I was working with him and a couple of others and writing copy for Amazon listings, product detail pages, title, bullet point, description, and like really was in the nitty gritty of trying to understand, during the very early ages of COVID, like how to write and build product listings and brands on Amazon. And that relationship grew, and then eventually, from that, as the agency started to grow, all of us leaders who were involved was like, I think it makes sense for Martin to be the CEO. And I embraced it wholeheartedly, saying like, okay, my time at the nonprofit, that chapter had ended, and it was a wonderful, life-changing experience. But at this point now, this stage of my life is where I got to really buckle down and be able to provide financially. And so I went, dove into the deep end of e-commerce, and for the next, I think, 2.5, almost 3 years, was working with almost 90 VAs from like Philippines and India to really scale Seller Universe. And before I had left to join Quartile, it was definitely doing 7 figures, and was a very healthy and just life-changing experience there as well. Going from nonprofit to kind of like quasi trying to run a business, and like during COVID, and like everything's remote, and like what is Amazon full service, like and like aggregators were popping up out of everywhere. It was just it was like the second gold rush, like as Amazon was trying to, and everybody was adopting to work from home and like pick up from the curb, and like Amazon private label. Like it was so crazy back then. And like shipping containers went from like 1,000, 4,000 to like 25,000, and then like people are bribing people at the docks to kind of unload their products first. It was insane. But it was, it's like, I what the saying is, like, people made more money selling shovels during the gold rush than they did selling the gold that they found. You know what I mean? It's like there was just so much business and so much buzz around e-commerce and Amazon agencies and brands during the COVID and just right after post-COVID. And in that process of trying to scale up a business, of course, part of Amazon account management is running the ads. And we had a lot of manual processes in place. We had explored and we utilized PackView for a good portion of time there. Shout out to Misha Cohen. She used to be at PackView. She's at Flywheel now. And she was our rep for PackView. She was fantastic. And then near the end of my time there, got pitched actually by Cormac, who's my colleague now at Quartile, but he pitched Quartile to me at Sally Universe. I even made the joke. I was at a conference last week in Seattle with Jeff Cohen, who's like the tech evangelist from Amazon. And at this conference, I said, hey, back then Quartile pitched me, and the guy who pitched me is in this room today, my colleague Cormac. And I said, hey, Cormac, I'm sure you're wondering why I haven't responded to any of your emails. I've changed roles since then, so I'm sorry for that. But yeah, so he pitched me, and I was like, wow, Quartile's fantastic. So it was already on my radar. And then I went to a networking dinner, and that's where I met Cormac and then Brad, who's our director of partnerships at Quartile. And so I guess to answer your question, like, how did I find myself today now as the director of enterprise brand development at Quartile? I just think it's like, I'm a very religious person. So of course I think, it's God's plan, God's will that we all kind of end up where we're meant to be. But, it's just when they say like your net worth is your net worth kind of thing. And I find that so true in our space, is that the ability to nurture and create authentic and long-lasting partnerships and relationships in our space, like, you never know when that will lead to your next opportunity. You never know when that will lead to your next deal. Will that lead to your next client? Will lead to your next, life change or decision in your career? When I met Brad at that dinner, we stayed in contact, became really good friends. And then when there was an opening at Quartile, he's like, hey, I think you'd be perfect for this. And, people would ask me, like, how would you, or why would you go from being a CEO to, it's not like an entry-level position, but you go from CEO to director. And I said, look, man, it's all about work-life balance. Like, being a CEO and running a company of almost 100 people in like 7 different time zones, like, you weren't sleeping. I wasn't sleeping. I'm taking meetings morning, afternoon, at night, and like, not only am I trying to grow this business with leadership, but I'm also dealing with clients and calls and expectations, and also pitching and trying to sell. And it's like, you're wearing a million hats. And kudos to people like you, Pasha, and to other agency owners and people who are leadership in full service agencies, because it's a grind. It's a grind. It's hard. But you learn a lot about yourself along the way. And so I'm happy to be at Quartile now, where instead of all of Amazon, we're just focusing on the ads part of it, which is kind of amazing. And yeah, it just kind of went full circle for me. And I appreciate that we knew each other from before, and now we're having this conversation exactly when it was meant to happen. I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely, yeah. And congrats on your family growing. And
well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Our firstborn, he's 2 months old, and nobody's sleeping at home. Maybe me a little bit.
Are you sleeping more now, or when you were the CEO?
Actually, when I was the CEO. Good question. Actually, yeah. Oh man.
Now you're the CEO of your household.
Yeah, no, actually, the baby's the CEO. We're all the VAs.
That's right.
Now.
That's right. You're the VA. That's true.
Now, yeah.
That's actually the reality of it. Like, I also have it. My son's almost 2.
Oh,
yeah, 24/7 job. There's every time zone possible.
And you get a bonus. It's in the diaper every like 2 hours. That's your bonus.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. So speaking of Gold Rush, would you say, are we still on that? Is the Gold Rush still around?
Great question. I think post-COVID, a lot of people were like, oh my goodness, e-commerce is dying. There's stagnation, like Shopify stock like plummeted. And like people even now are still, like the big 4 are a lot of people laying off, hundreds, if not thousands of workers in our space. I think Amazon like a month ago or 2 months ago just announced another round of layoffs. And then also aggregators was like a huge thing. And then now they're all mostly, they've either changed and rebranded to like, hey, we're a roll-up, or we're like a brand incubator or brand accelerator. And it's like, some of them are still around, and I know a lot of those people, but other ones kind of, fell by the wayside just by the nature of, it was so exciting to get your skin in the game and say, look, we're gonna have $100 million worth of funding, and then we're gonna buy all these brands that in 3 to 5 years could make us $300 million. Fair. here's the problem. You're looking at projections off of a time in e-commerce of unprecedented growth. Like that is not a sustainable trajectory in terms of how we saw e-commerce explode, unless there's a COVID-20 right around the corner, and then after another year there's a COVID-21. And it's like we're not going to go back to pandemic, and if we
Yeah.
are, it's not something that you can predict. And I don't think, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I don't think as an aggregator with all that money that it made sense to bet off of those numbers, to think that growth would continue at that rate. Having said that, I don't think e-commerce is dead, because if you look at some of the statistics and the graphs, like maybe like a year or two after post-COVID, we kind of reverted back to the mean, where it's like we're still growing at the rate in which e-commerce was traditionally growing year over year. The only difference is the pandemic blip was just that. It was a blip. But I think the long-term benefits is that we've all kind of been mentally trained to shop online. Like certain things where you usually were like, I'm just going to go to the grocery store, I'm going to go to Walmart, I'll go to Costco, and people still do that. But because of that 2.5-year period where people were on lockdown, it was almost like trained in our brains to consider e-commerce as another option for some of these products and items that you traditionally would buy in a brick or mortar. So no, I don't think e-commerce is dying. Is it still the gold rush of the pandemic? Absolutely not. But I think one of the main contributors to the doom and gloom and why people are losing jobs is, the onset of automation. And like we can't ignore that automation is not just making a huge impact in our industry, but in a lot of different sectors. And I think these companies, yes, for the benefit of their shareholders, have to position and reorganize themselves to be profitable and to leverage however benefits automation can bring them in whatever industry that they may be in. But at the same time, it's also an opportunity for a lot of people to pivot, like I did for myself. There's a lot of opportunity there for people who want to get into AI and get into any kind of implementation of automation and other services. I just heard about this person who came up with this idea of utilizing ChatGPT to automate your responses to dating apps. So it will learn how you would respond to people on these dating apps, and you can now mass converse with as many people as you want, because utilizing their software allows you in your own voice to automate the interaction. And then I guess you would kind of filter them into certain segments or categories or checkpoints where it's like, okay, my AI self has now pre-qualified maybe 50 people out of the 500 that I've messaged across 3 or 4 different apps, and now maybe I'll take these conversations seriously. So it's like, is the gold rush over? No, but there's a different rush now. And so it's a different shovel that has the opportunity to be sold. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it comes in waves. So
It does.
one gold rush ends and another one begins, and there's always going to be a gold rush. So
And I think it was Warren Buffett that was like, when people are greedy, you should be afraid. And when people are afraid, you should be greedy. And right now, the height of AI stigma and fear is like at its peak. And like ChatGPT 4.0 was just like announced yesterday, where you can like have a legit conversation with ChatGPT, and it doesn't respond to you like Siri or Google does, where it sounds very much robotic. It almost sounds, with the inflections, like a human being. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Her with Scarlett Johansson and Joaquin Phoenix, but he's talking to an AI and it sounds like a human being. It sounds like a person in his ear. And the way that ChatGPT 4.0 comes out when it responds to you sounds exactly like a person. And so the fear is there, but knowing that the fear is there, there's a lot of opportunity, because the fear will allow people to find, okay, well, how do I make you not afraid? How do I find a tool or a service or an offering or a business or a product that makes you feel a little bit more okay with something that you usually wouldn't be okay with?
yeah, I think the fear comes from recognition of power being in the hands of the unknown. And
Exactly.
so in that unknown, we have the opportunity to make something known and to
To make it
discover.
known. Yeah.
Yeah.
And guess what? Everybody likes the guy that makes me feel like, oh, or the girl that makes me feel like, okay, I get it. It's not
Yeah.
so scary. Pasha made me understand that I could actually do a million things for the low price of $9.95 a month. He can do all this stuff for me. No need to be afraid. Now I have all this free time on my hands. Thank you, Pasha. Take my money, so definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the market needs to catch up too. So like also you have to be good with the timing. Like I think when you're really ahead of the game,
Yeah.
sometimes you can kind of almost like shoot yourself in the foot. Like if you release something that's
Too
not
early.
really, yeah,
Yeah.
too early
That's
is
like when
not
they say
good.
like, oh, they were ahead of their time. And like, that's very true.
Yeah.
That's very true. And it's like, I know right now, like we're here to talk about AI bid optimization and Quartile, but I definitely feel like that was true for this case of Quartile. They've been around for about 6 or 7 years now, and like when you would talk to somebody, maybe even as recent as like 2-3 years ago, like, wait, you want to automate my bids? Like, I don't have control, or like, and that's not the case at Quartile, but the fear is like, okay, the black box AI is going to do all this stuff for me. Like, I don't know if I should trust it, right? So like, all of the attention maybe 2-3 years ago, some of it was great, which is why Quartile has been very successful, and the other half was like, hey, maybe I'm not ready for that. But then now, every time I go to another conference, it's like somebody has this new AI automation bid thing for ads, and it's like it's coming out of the woodwork, and it's like, hey guys, we were kind of here first. But there's more than enough business to go around. But definitely, I think Quartile has done a great job in being the one that provides the known to people, the unknown being like, hey, is this really a black box? And it's like, no, I think it's more so understanding that times have changed, and automation and a robust and mature bid algorithm that has like proven efficacy can really change brands that are the right kind of brands, businesses that are the right kind of businesses that would leverage our tech. Sorry for the shameless plug there, but I thought that was like a natural segue into kind of like why people are afraid of AI bid algorithms. And like, hey, if we've been around for 7 years now, we've won a lot of awards from Amazon. We're doing significantly well year over year. I'm sure the algorithm isn't Skynet and is going to wake up and be self-aware and like murder us all in our sleep. It's actually going to make us a lot of money, and it has been.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Amazon system has gotten so dynamic, so complex. So naturally, you want to have some kind of machine there that's really doing a lot of the stuff that a human can't possibly do, but it's not just handing it over entirely, right?
Exactly.
So in any kind of optimization setup, you wouldn't want to just say, this is my
No.
tacos goal and I'll see you in a month. Tell me
See
what
you
I
later.
did. Yeah.
And you know what? That's actually one of the unique differentiators of Quartile. It's saying, when we talk about being ahead of the game, like the differentiator from Quartile and other AI automation is like most of those services are self-service. Here are the keys. We'll give you some training, maybe some modules and videos to watch, and then you kind of run with it. And like your mileage may vary. There's going to be some very sophisticated self-service clients and agencies who are like, yeah, just give me the keys, give me the access. My team will figure it out. And they'll be very successful, and it'll be very cost effective, right? Because I just need access to the platform, right? They would just need access to the platform. The unique and the differentiator with Quartile is that there are some people who don't want to learn that, but they still want to know what's going on and they still want to meet. So we have that managed service component at Quartile. So it's like, we will manage your ads, but we will still show you every step of the way what we're doing. You can still have access to the platform. If you want to be trained, we can still train you and kind of work in like a hybrid capacity. Obviously, it requires more investment on Quartile's part to be able to offer a managed service, because then we're talking about customer, CSMs, account managers, AEs, and like you're meeting every single week, and every client will have different use cases and needs. But I think it's almost like a good mix where it's not too heavily AI, where like you have the keys and you have to figure it out. And then it's not so much relying on just, manual managed service where there's still going to be some human error and assumption. It's really like the most efficient and scalable data-driven way to be efficient with your ads, plus the human intelligence to kind of layer on some of that strategy on top of it.
What about pricing and inventory? Are those factors that kind of
Yeah, great question.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
in terms of
how does that all play together, right? Because you have, all right, I want to grow my revenue, I want to grow my profit, but this is what my shipments look like, and this is what my inventory levels look like.
for
And
sure.
yeah, like are you guys keeping a P&L and kind of adjusting bids according to that, and looking at velocities and restocks and all of those factors?
Great question. So in terms of like, hey, does it have retail operations outside of just the base algorithm? It does. But I will say, and this is what I said at the conference last week, like we have a lot of really great competitors in the space. If I'm talking to an agency and they're like, hey, we really want to work with a robust retail operation platform that doesn't just allow me to manage bids or create rules, but I also want to be able to submit tickets and to monitor inventory and pricing and all that stuff, then for me, I think if that's your number one priority, and it's not necessarily like um a bid efficiency and like optimization, then I would tell them, hey, go to a Packview, go to a Sky. Like Packview and Sky have been around for the longest time. There's a reason why they've been around for a long time, and they're kind of like a mile wide, right, in terms of their offerings, and they have a lot of really great retail operation features that kind of complement their philosophy when it comes to ads. Packview is traditionally self-service, manual, rules-based optimizations. I think they just recently introduced some sort of managed service. Fantastic. Sky wasn't even primarily an Amazon agency. They're really more for other different marketplaces and D2C and stuff like that. But they've recently, a couple of years ago, introduced Amazon, and I wouldn't say they're the most cutting edge in terms of Amazon, but they also have a lot of really great features. So I think in terms of some of the things that others might be looking for that are more retail operation focused, then I would say, hey, consider Quartile, but you can consider the others too. Having said that, our platform does monitor inventory, so it does give you the ability to say, like, hey, if this particular ad is crushing it and we only have 14 days left of coverage and your replenishment is going to take a month, then we should probably slow down and kind of reduce the velocity of sales in which we're seeing. Same time, we also have the ability to look at profitability at an ASIN level. Hey, some of these products are doing really well, based off the margins, and of course you have to provide Quartile and the team with some of that information. And that's really where the human intelligence comes in. The bidding will be as efficient as you tell it to be. Having said that, the managed side of the team will look at other retail operation factors that the bidding will not be necessarily prioritizing and say, look, your inventory is X, we need Y amount of time, we'll make Z adjustment. Hey, this profitability is X, you want to be able to, you're going to get more of this inventory, so let's increase by Y, or like, hey, it's a seasonal trend. So there's so many factors, which I think actually bolsters the argument for why Quartile is so effective, because the algorithm will only do what you tell it to do. It won't always necessarily do what you want it to do, because you may want 2 or 3 different things that could conflict with each other depending on what the priority is. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, I really want to be able to crush it because I want to be able to show my shareholders that we crush it this quarter. But if you crush it this quarter, you may run the risk of stocking out, or you may run the risk that we have to kind of reduce the strategy of trying to scale your sales based off of the bids, because you're going to run out soon. Like, there's going to be a lot of adjustments, or like, hey, this isn't so profitable, but I want to be able to show the efficacy of this particular campaign or this particular marketing strategy that's factored into other different channels. Like, there's so many different factors that go into your ads, and it's not just the bidding. So for us, whether it's manual or managed, a lot of and we have over 5,600 clients, 26 different countries or 28 different countries. Like, they lean on us a lot. Hey, are we doing this correctly? Hey, we want to do this. How do we do that? But the best part of it is, at the end of the day, regardless of the conversation that we're having, one, people have choice. If you want to do a single ASIN, single keyword, placement, we call that Quartile 1. If you're familiar with that granular structure, which we think makes sense, we can do that. If you want to do AI bid, AI bidding, we can do that based off of AMS data. If you want to do rules-based, we can create rules too. If you want more retail operations, there's a lot of other tools out there. If you want more self-service, that's like not that, that's more cost-effective, there's like an XMARS. Like, there's so many options. And I think the critical thing and this is actually the topic that we had last week, was, how do you find the right tech partner? And as much as I wanted to go up there and say, hey, everybody here, y'all need to work with Quartile, we're fantastic. Like, finding the right tech partner means you're aligning with what they're able to do well versus what you're really looking for. And I think so long as we're honest about that conversation, then there's enough shovels to go around to be sold, and there's enough gold to be found for people who are looking.
Very well put. Yeah, in our agency, full disclosure, we're using Packview.
Cool.
But it's like you said, that's the partner that fit for us, and we did go through our fair share of Tachometrics, Quartile, Feedvisor. We went through the whole journey, checked out a couple other ones.
Yeah.
And we landed on that one just because it fit for our setup. But I really did like Quartile, and I do agree that you guys were the first ones to even start using AI, like that abbreviation, before it became like a buzzword.
Exactly.
Because you have basically put together algorithms that nobody else had put together.
Yeah.
And I did find that to be very efficient during the time we were using it.
And the crazy thing is, like, the algorithm is based off of patents in the US. Like, the danger right now, because it's such a buzzword, is like people will white label or license, and like, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But for those who are looking for the right partner or the right service, like, you just got to be aware, like, how old is this technology? Has its efficacy been proven? I mean, there are some brand owners and some agencies that want to be early adopters, and they want to be like, hey, just like our early clients at Quartile, maybe they adopted us very early. and they reap a lot of benefits, but there's also a lot of risk because you're an early adopter. So I think just be aware of, like, where the tech is coming from. Is it proven out? Our algorithm is based off 6 patents in the US, so at least it's proprietary, and at least it's been around, that it's based in the US, and that you're not like dealing with a fly-by-night company that's like promising you the sun and the moon and the stars with an algorithm that was written yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, there's risk and reward to being an early adopter, but there's also reward in doing, like you said, the right due diligence and knowing, like, hey, if I found the right partner, then this is the right fit for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think if you've been in the game long enough, then you probably have a lot of data that's not just being pulled by an API, but also just your own database that you can kind of derive a lot of the movement from. My question is also, how important are some of these things like day parting and like hourly bid optimization? And,
Great question.
yeah, do they really accelerate and bring that level of kind of, usability that's just impossible for a human to do? Or is it just kind of overkill at some point?
I mean, I think both can be true, right? Like, if you don't have a huge catalog and your product sells relatively well, and you're not looking to introduce more product, you're not looking to scale your brand or your business, and you kind of just want to have it running as like a really nice private label side business, you could probably find a really cheap tool. Cheap, I'm not saying in a derivative way, but a really cost-effective tool that can kind of automate a lot of the tasks and the monitoring that you would do. Maybe it'll send you a notification if like inventory is going down, or if your bid has hit a certain ceiling, or if you're performing well, and it's going to tell you to increase your bids or whatever. And you can make some really great general, entry level rules. Like, if that's your goal, then go for it. But if you're in a position where you have a good amount of ad spend and you're trying to figure out, well, what can I do, whether I want to increase my ad spend or not? Am I spending it as efficiently as I can? And do I understand my customer base well enough to know when I should be spending it based off of which keywords and which key phrases during the time of day and day of the week? So I'll give you an example. So about 2 to 3 years ago, Quartile was part of either it was a closed alpha or closed beta with Amazon when they were rolling out Amazon Marketing Stream. And obviously, Amazon's goal was to be able to prove the value of this data, that every single hour you're going to be able to receive, cost per click, CPAs, click through rate, and conversion rate, and all of that information, and you can look it down by bid and by budget and by placement. All of that stuff is being sent to you hourly. What is the value in that? What is the actionable data there that can actually lead to some bid efficiency? And the way that Quartile did it was, hey, we're going to take all of this AMS data, we're going to take our AI algorithm, and we're going to integrate it. So we're not just going to look at the data and make some changes manually. We're actually going to integrate it into our AI so that the AI is learning from the hourly data that's being pinged from Amazon servers. I think we do like every 15 minutes. So what is the value of that? Usually in my discovery calls, I show a screenshot of, or I go through the platform, and it's almost like a heat map. So say, for example, Pasha is a wonderful coffee, right? And your client will see through AMS on our Quartile platform that at 12 o'clock, if you're bidding, like $1 or $1.25 for like, Columbia roast coffee for that particular phrase, and at 12 o'clock, there's like an 18% chance of conversion because most people aren't looking for coffee when they're about to go to sleep. And then at 1 o'clock, that goes 18% goes to 15%. And then at 2 o'clock, it goes from 15% to 8%. So now we know that every single hour on a Monday, evening or early morning, Sunday evening, early morning Monday, that people are going to sleep. So if the algorithm is aware of that, based off of the data that we know is true from Amazon Marketing Stream, then we know why continue to bid for a particular keyword or key phrase when we know that the likelihood of conversion is going down from 18 to 15 to 8. It doesn't mean we completely cancel it out, and you can if you want. You have the ability to turn it off, but we wouldn't recommend to do that. Well, you would leave maybe like a cent or two for whatever keyword or key phrase, because hey, if you can get a conversion at 1 cent, like, why would you not do that? You know what I mean? Like, there's still a percentage chance to get those conversions. However, as they start waking up, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, that 8% goes to 20, 30, 40%. And now everybody's bidding at those keywords and key phrases because that's your competition. They know that all of your customers are waking up and maybe they need to replenish on their coffee. We've taken that wasted ad spend and have now reinvested it so that you're able to bid in the times where you have a higher chance of conversion. And that can happen at scale. So if Pasha's Wonderful Coffee has 700 different SKUs, and each SKU has like 3 or 4 different sizes and flavors, and each of those are going to have 3 to 4 to 5 campaigns based off of the keywords or key phrases you're running, then yeah, technically you can do it manually, but then you could technically hire 1,000 VAs if you want, and I don't know if that's the most cost effective way of doing it. And then you also have to assume, like, are those VAs going to be making the same kind of data driven decisions? Of course not, because not all VAs are made the same, and they're all going to be looking at the data differently, and they're all going to be strategizing differently, right? And so I think the beauty of day parting as it's being implemented in Quartile is not only are we looking at that hourly data, but it's because it's directly integrated into our platform that gives us kind of that cutting edge advantage. Now, there's a case study if you go to advertising.amazon.com, and if you look at like partner network, so Amazon has a huge partner network of people who provide ad management services. There's a case study that talks about exactly what I just talked about, that Amazon and Quartile were part of a closed test. And what Quartile did was they took a sample group, I think it was like 150 plus brands. And so they ran the bid automation with AMS with that control group, and then they ran it for another group that had no AMS data. And like, I think the control group saw a significant increase, not only in sales, but a decrease in wasted ad spend, an increase in efficiency. So it's like, it's proven. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean it's for everybody. But if the conversation is, hey, is day parting worth it? Well, it depends on what your goals are, and it depends on what brand you're running it off of. It's like if you have one couch and you're selling the one couch for $700 and you only have so much, like, how much data are we really pulling from a single campaign for a single product? Not much. So, like, again, it depends on what you're looking for. But the brands that we work with, especially CPG, where it's like, hey, we need to know where to dump the fuel, because if you have one product that's running super hot and heavy, and that's great, I bet you there's a lot of wasted ad spend there, even though it's doing really well, because you want to be able to identify, during the day and during the week, when is your best time to dump that fuel. It's like, I think about it like F1. All the cars are fast, but it's the small, minute changes and the small, minute engineering adjustments between races that is the difference between pole position and like 12th or like last, right? And it's like, at this stage in the game, and we work with a lot of different small to medium-sized brands, but I'm in the enterprise, department. The brands that we're talking to, right? These percentages throughout the day, they add up. If your ad spend is 100,000 a month, 200,000 a month, you're running DSP, if you're at $1 million a month, a difference in 3 to 5% conversion turning into, a more efficient ad spend strategy can be huge, quarter over quarter, in terms of not just profit, but also just the trajectory of your brand and how you approach market share of voice, and how you position your brand against your competitors. You start to realize, like, oh man, now I have a better picture of really how we're doing and where we really want to reinvest our ad dollars. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that with scale, the more minute changes really have a huge impact. Like,
Yeah, it
I was
does.
reading something, about Amazon testing out their new AI system with keywords versus contextual searches. And they, through their test, saw like less than 1% improvement. But that's like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anything that they can do to make any kind of improvement. And it's the same case here. I guess with this being said, my question now is, all right, you guys have over 5,000 clients. You have access to the same data across all of the clients,
Mhm.
and you're essentially trying to achieve the same goal for everybody. So is there any kind of conflict of interest that you guys run into when two sellers who are both your clients working with the same data and the same
Right, right,
system,
right.
are they're competing against each other? Are they driving the price up? I guess, to answer my own question, maybe the product is different, in some
Mhm.
way. It cannot be identical to
Right,
products,
right.
even though it's like, there's coffee and then there's coffee, right?
For
So,
sure, for sure.
um,
No, great
how
question, great
is that
question.
an issue that you guys run into really, or it's
I
not really a
I
problem?
think in practice, it could always, any agency that's handling any kind of brand or two brands in the same space, there can always be the perceived conflict of interest or bias, right? I run into this question a lot when I talk to like people who do like dynamic repricing. Like, so for example, like a Trellis or like a Eva Guru,
Mhm.
like I've asked, like, what happens if you have two clients that you're dynamically repricing for in the same category they're bidding for? You know what I mean? So it's like there's that perceived conflict of interest. I think the benefit, in having this conversation with somebody like you, Pasha, and others who have managed Amazon accounts before is that we have an understanding that it's really not just, yes, ads are important, but at the end of the day, like, the purchasing decision will always be on the customer. And yes, they may see your ad versus your competitor's ad. Maybe they'll see yours 2 times more than the competitor, but maybe the competitor has a better price in terms of how they've managed their bids, or they're managing their bids more effectively. All of those things can be true. And maybe both brands are on Quartile. But at the end of the day, if I go online, right? So for example, I'm looking for a couple of months ago, I was looking for a stroller for my son, right? He's 2 months. And I'm like, I need to know what is the best stroller. I watch all the videos and the reviews and the articles. And I finally get on Amazon. And the difference between the two choices was the two finalists in the search for the best stroller was, I think it was like Nuna and Up a Baby, right?
Mm.
Both expensive, but apparently both like top of the line models. I'm sure that there are multiple use cases where the two best options are being run by the same either marketing agency or ad agency, or the same tool that's promoting both brands. So for me, if both of those brands are being run by Quartile, it doesn't really matter to me how many ads I saw, because I'm going to make the decision based off what I think is best for my family. So yes, there's always the perceived, like, hey, there might be a conflict of interest, but first, we do a very good job in securing the data. So one account manager for one brand is not going to be talking to another account manager of another brand where they're competing at the same time. We're very, very careful with that. Number two, the information is also private. So it's not like I can peek through and look at the algorithmic bid adjustments and the strategies that you're doing for a competitor. Having said that, the only competitive edge you're going to have is how true the data is that's coming through. So if you and I are both competitors, but we're both using Quartile, and I'm putting $100,000 worth of ad data through the pipes, and you're putting in 50, then like Quartile only has half the budget that I'm giving to make your ads effective, whereas I'm giving them double that, and they have more to play around with in terms of finding the right keywords, key phrases, time of day, and being more aggressive during those higher converting hours, right? So yes, theoretically, conflict of interest can happen for any industry and any service-based model, but for us, we know that the Amazon ecosystem is more than just ads. And at the end of the day, it's choice, right? We want to give as much choice to consumers out there. And sometimes the listings are trash. Like, hey, what if we do a really great job in bringing all that traffic and the listing is awful? And the images are low res, there's no A+, or the brand story doesn't make sense. This brand store is not set up, and you're looking at it, like, the copy doesn't really read like a human being. Maybe they use a little bit too much generative AI, or like, what I mean? Like, there's so many small factors that will put off a person in purchasing. And then conversely, maybe there's going to be some who are like, I don't care what it looks like. It's $20. It's going to get to me by the end of the day. I'm going to buy it. So there's so many factors outside of, a bidding strategy that will impact the purchasing path of a customer. But, if we're going to, at the end of the day, apples to apples, we just got to do the best in positioning our brands to succeed with the traffic that we think can be bought at the most effective price.
What about DSP? You guys work with DSP at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do DSP and we utilize AMC queries. We were also one of the early adopters in utilizing queries for that as well. A differentiator, I mean, for those who don't know, so AMC, I said this at the talk last week, like sponsored display is like, understanding your audience through a magnifying glass. And then DSP is understanding your audience through a telescope. And then, DSP with AMC queries is like GPS with a microscope. Like, it's so targeted, and it allows you to understand at an even more granular level than a microscope or a telescope who are your customers, and who are the ones that are potentially lookalike audiences to your customers, and whatever contextual or behavioral context clues can we look at to understand like where we should allocate our budget. And you can take some of that first party data and implement that in your D2C strategy and your social strategy. It helps you understand. We had this one client that we signed up for DSP that sold really great car parts, and they wanted to be able to target a certain type of, they wanted to target mechanics and enthusiasts, and they want to be able to understand where can they find these people geographically. And, we put together a DSP plan for them and said, hey, look, we can look even by model of car, behavior and where they live and their socioeconomic status to be able to pinpoint, like, the likelihood that this person is a mechanic is pretty high. And now that we've determined that through queries and utilizing different audiences, then we can start targeting them through ads, whether it's top of the funnel, middle, or the bottom, right? And people, there's some people who tinker with their car every day, and there's some people who like barely, they'll run that car into the ground before they bring it to a mechanic, right? So you can be very there's a high chance where you can waste a lot of ad spend on DSP for things like car parts because you don't really know, unless you're granular enough to create a strategy and you work with a partner and a tech partner to utilize AMC queries to understand, like, what is the path of purchase? Who are my new to brand customers? How many exposures to PPC and DSP ads does it take for somebody to actually convert based off of whatever look window or look back window that we're using? So yes, we manage DSP. Yes, we use queries. I'm not going to name other competitors, but we don't charge extra if you want to run 10 queries today. Like if you're running DSP ads, like I know some charge for that, and they charge for like running the data and then generating a report. And hey, that's your business model. But something that I love to say is like, look, everybody has access to DSP, everybody has access to AMC. We don't charge for our AMC data, like the queries that you run at the data that you get from it. So if you want to run a query every single day and kind of like walk us through, and we walk you through what we see, what you see, and we go through the strategy every single week or whatever, it's totally fine.
So what can you explain the difference between AMC and AMS? Is
Sure.
it the same data set, but just a different way that is being pulled?
I think AMS is primarily focused more on like your PPC ads, right? And whereas AMC is really just leveraging any kind of display ads that you're running, and whereas AMS is targeting more so on the KPIs and the metrics of the performance of the ads, AMC is more so like, who are the people that are interacting and engaging with these ads, depending on the tactic of the funnel that you're running for DSP ads, and how can you leverage that information to kind of dive deeper into the targeting that you would do for both your PPC and for your DSP. So in the talk last week, that was part of that conversation, is you want to be able to challenge your team, whether you want to work with Quartile or not, whether you're already working with a partner, fantastic. Challenge your existing tech partner to leverage AMS data as much as you can, even if it's a small percent here or a small percent there. It adds up. If you make one change a week, it's 52 changes. One change a day, it's 365. If you're doing it on an hourly clip, it's over 8,000 changes. So it's like 8,000 times 2-3% efficiency. It's a big deal, right? So leverage it that way. And then for AMC, like if you're already doing DSP, ask your tech partner, hey, can we run some queries? Do you guys have AMC access, and how are you guys utilizing that for your clients? If so, can we walk through this and kind of understand, work with the Amazon rep to see what my addressable audience is, and we can start creating and formulating strategies around who we should be targeting? Because we would never recommend DSP and running AMC queries for somebody that doesn't have a well-running PPC campaign and foundation already. Why bring or why initiate a more advanced ad tactic when the foundational one isn't set up yet? But once you're up and running with your PPC ads and AMS is being leveraged creatively and effectively, hopefully, great. Let's start talking about DSP and running AMC queries. But it's a process, and you want to make sure that you put all of your ducks in the row, or else you're just throwing money out the window, and we wouldn't want to recommend that.
I see why Quartile brought you on, Martin.
It's the half-grown beard. That's why. It took me like 3 months to grow this out. That's why.
Thanks. I appreciate all the insight. Thanks
course,
for,
of course.
those answers were really in depth and very insightful. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing all your wisdom.
Of course. And, I just want to say, I think since we're hitting time now, it's not easy to run these webinar podcast style content. And, sometimes people don't always get a chance to watch it. But I just want to acknowledge, like, this is fantastic. Thank you so much, Pasha, for bringing me on. It takes a lot of hard work, and I acknowledge the work that you put into this. And, at the end of the day, you're putting out content for free, and you're putting out value out there for people to learn. And you never know, one of these episodes can change somebody's business, can change somebody's family, socioeconomic status or situation, because they learned something. So I think we may not always, and you may not always get to see like the reward after filming these things, but just know that you're contributing to the e-commerce community in a positive way. And we appreciate you for it, man. I appreciate you for it, for sure.
Thank you, Martin. I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it's something I'm doing, out of heart. I recently published my first newsletter on LinkedIn, and I was kind of talking about my thoughts after your episode number 16. So,
Oh, nice.
15
Nice,
episodes, and I was thinking,
Yeah.
all right, how is this affecting my life? And I'm like, man, this is a fractionalized mentorship that I've just
It is.
right?
It
It's like
is.
I have
Yeah.
all these smart people coming on, and I'm listening and learning, and maybe somebody else will have the chance to learn too if they want to. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Look, we've
it's
been talking for 45 minutes. If somebody listened to me and was like, Martin doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, but then for like 2 minutes, they're like, you know what? That actually makes sense. Great. It's okay.
yep.
Maybe I was garbage for 90% of it, but maybe for 10% of it, it was valuable. Thank you so much. I hope it was useful.
Yeah, exactly. It's, finding nuggets of gold, right? In the gold
Exactly.
rush.
In the gold rush. Definitely. I like
Thanks
that.
everybody for watching. I appreciate it again, Martin. We'll see everybody on the next one.
For sure. Thank you so much, Pasha.
Take care.